Chapter 13 of Part 1 of the Lives of the Three Misses Judsons, by Arabella M. Wilson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Mrs. Judson's arrival in America, influence of her visit, hostile opinions, her person and manners, extracts from her letters. In the meanwhile, events of some interest were transpiring in Burma, in consequence of the persecution against Maung Shwa Gnong, which had obliged him to flee for his life, and the new vigilance of priests and officers in respect to converts. The inquirers withdrew altogether from the mission house, and Mr. Judson was obliged to close the zayat and suspend public preaching on the Sabbath, though still the converts visited him privately for instruction and consolation. Mr. J.'s solitary condition was, however, soon relieved by the arrival of Dr. and Mrs. Price, who came to share his labors among the heathen, and also by the return of Mr. and Mrs. Hugh from Serampore, bringing with them the printing press, whose absence had occasioned no small delay and inconvenience to Mr. Judson in his labors. On the 25th of September, 1822, Mrs. J. arrived in America. Her feelings on revisiting her native land were best learned from a letter to Mr. Judsons' parents dated September 27th. With mingled sensations of joy and sorrow I address a few lines to the parents of my beloved husband. Joy that I once more find myself in my own native country, and with the prospect of meeting with loved relatives and friends. Sorrow that he who has been a participator in all my concerns for the last 10 years is not now at hand to partake with me in the joyful anticipations of meeting those he so much loves. I left Liverpool on the 16th of August, and arrived at New York Harbor day before yesterday. On account of the prevalence of yellow fever, prudence forbade my landing. Accordingly I embarked on board the steamboat for this place, where I arrived a few hours ago. It was my intention to pass a week in Philadelphia, and then go to Providence, and thence to you in Woburn, as it would be on my way to Bradford, where I shall spend the winter. But Dr. Stoughton wishes me to go to Washington, which will detain me in this part of the country a week longer. However, I hope to be with you in a fortnight from this time. My health is much improved since I left England, and I begin to hope the disorder is entirely eradicated. Of this visit of Mrs. Judson to America, Professor Gammell remarks in general as follows: Her visit to the United States forms an epoch of no inconsiderable importance in the progress of interest in missions among the churches of various denominations in this country. She visited several of the leading cities of the Union, met a large number of associations of ladies, attended the session of the Triennial Convention at Washington, and in a multitude of social circles, alike in the South and in the North, recited the thrilling narrative of what she had seen and experienced during the eventful years in which she had dwelt in a heathen land. But relaxation and traveling for health and interviews with religious friends were not her only occupation. In her retirement, in addition to maintaining an extensive correspondence, she found time to prepare the history of the mission in Burma, which was published in her name, in a series of letters addressed to Mr. Butterworth, the gentleman beneath whose roof she had been a guest during her residence in England. These records, which were principally compiled from documents which had been published before, contained the first continuous account of the Burman mission ever given to the public. The work was widely read in England and America, and received the favorable notice of several of the leading organs of public criticism. The influence which she exerted in favor of the cause of missions during her brief residence of 8 or 9 months in the United States, it is hardly possible now to estimate. She enlisted more fully in the cause not a few leading minds who have since rendered it signal service, both by eloquent vindications and by judicious counsels, and by the appeals which she addressed to Christians of her own sex, and her fervid conversations with persons of all classes and denominations in America, as well as by the views which she submitted to the managers of the mission. A new zeal for its persecution was everywhere created, and the missionary enterprise, instead of being regarded with doubt and misgiving, as it had been by many, even among Christians, began to be understood in its higher relations to all the hopes of man, and to be contemplated in its true grandeur and ennobling moral dignity. Such is the opinion of her visit expressed by an elegant and enlightened scholar, now that more than a quarter of a century has passed, bringing triumph to the missionary cause, and honor to its first founders and advocates. But such, we regret to say, was not the universal sentiment of her contemporaries. Many persons well remember the unfounded stories put in circulation respecting her, by some whose motives we will not inquire into, as they would scarcely bear investigation, in regard to her actions, her intentions, and even her apparel. As her biographer remarks in introducing some of her letters at this period, it was said that her health was not seriously impaired, and that she visited the South with a view to excite attention and applause. To persons who would put forth or circulate such calumnies, a perusal of her letters, in which she utters her feelings to her friends without reserve, will, it is hoped, minister a rebuke sufficiently severe to awaken shame and penitence. And to those who may unwarily have been led to form unfavorable opinions respecting Mrs. Judson, we cannot doubt that these letters will afford welcome evidence of her modest and amiable disposition, consistent and exemplary demeanor, ardent piety, and steady, irrepressible devotion to the interests of the mission. The persons and manners of Mrs. Judson at this time were, according to the testimony of some who will recollect her, engaging and attractive in no common degree. Her sweet and ready smile, her dark expressive eye, the animation and sprightliness of her conversation, and her refined taste and manners, made her a favorite in all circles. Her dress, for which she was indebted to the liberality of British friends, was more rich and showy than she would have chosen for herself, and, as has been said, excited unkind remarks from some who did not care to investigate her reasons for wearing it. Elegant as it was said to be, it was certainly far better she should wear it, even at the risk of seeming inconsistency, than to put her friends to the expense of other and plainer clothing. As to the imputation that she preferred the éclat of life in a southern city to the retirement of her New England home, it is sufficient to answer that a constitution relaxed and enfeebled by 10 years' residence in a tropical climate was ill fitted to bear the rigors of a New England winter, and as her whole object in her visit was the restoration of her health, she conceived it her duty to choose such a place of sojourn as should seem most favorable to it. After a stay of 6 weeks with her parents in Bradford, Mrs. J. found it necessary to seek a milder climate, and was advised to try that of Baltimore. She had a pleasant journey to that city, stopping one day with friends in New York, and arrived there on the 5th of December. From her letters written about this time we proceed to give some extracts. My journey to this place was pleasant, though fatiguing. I passed one night only in New York, and spent a most pleasant evening in the society of a large party of good people who were collected for the purpose of prayer. Many fervent petitions were presented in behalf of the perishing Burmans, and the little church established in that country. It was an evening to me full of interest, but I found at the conclusion that my strength was quite exhausted, and I began to fear whether I should be able to continue my journey. How much of heaven might Christians enjoy even here on earth if they would keep in view what ought to be their great object in life. If they would but make the enjoyment of God their main pursuit, how much more consistent their profession would be with their conduct, how much more useful their lives, and how much more rapidly they would ripen for eternal glory. Christians do not sufficiently assist one another in their spiritual walk. They are not enough in the habit of conversing familiarly and affectionately on the state of each other's souls, and kindly encouraging each other to persevere and get near to heaven. One degree of grace attained in this world is worth more than every earthly enjoyment. I ought to mention that I found much of the true missionary spirit existing in New York. I began this letter some days ago, but a violent cold has prevented my finishing it. I am very thankful that I am no farther north than Baltimore, for I feel confident the cold would soon destroy me. I have not been out of the house since I arrived, and hardly out of my chamber. My health is certainly better than when I left Boston, though I have a heavy cold and some cough. What can be done to excite a missionary spirit in this country? I dare not engage in the subject till I am better. It would take up my whole soul and retard my recovery. A little while, and we are in eternity. Before we find ourselves there, let us do much for Christ. Chapter 14